So here we are at this swanky party in Matthew chapter 14. It's a very odd collection of people, but like a lot of parties, everybody's there to make everybody else feel better about their weird stuff. And in particular, we've got a tension here between a guy who has been publicly shamed by a truth teller with nothing to lose and his wife, who's also sort of his niece, and his former sister-in-law and current wife. It's all the same person that I'm talking about here. This is a very strange social setting, and the host of this birthday party would really like to kill the person who's sitting down in the prison cell, but understands there'll be too big a political price to pay. But his new wife / former niece / former sister-in-law doesn't feel any such hesitations about the political fallout. She wants that truth teller in that prison cell gone. So at Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias, Matthew 14:6 here, danced for them and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. This feels so much like the book of Esther. It feels like the banquet where King Xerxes is hosting everybody and getting all liquored up. And I've got to think, as the original audience is reading this text, they all would have had come to mind the story of Esther. I mean, this was a book that was read aloud to the entire assembly every year as part of the Jewish religious calendar. Everybody's heard this story a bazillion times. And in the story right at the beginning, Xerxes, the king of Persia, is called this war council, and he gets embarrassed and disappointed by his queen Vashti, who won't come out and do the kind of dancing and entertaining that he wants for his drunken war council guests. And just as a side note, probably this would have been the war council that was used to plan the campaigns against the Greeks that Zack Snyder's 300 films describes as well. This is the stuff where they went and fought against Athens and against Leonidas and the Spartans. So original audience members who are consuming Esther would have further viewed Xerxes as a clown king who is easily manipulatable by everybody else around him. But he's always like, I'm the big boy. I'm the one that makes the decisions around here. But in addition to not actually making any of his own decisions and getting shown up by his wife, he also gets defeated by the piddly Greeks. That would be in the cloud of historical remembrance in the back of the minds of the original audience. So that clown king motif is very pronounced in the book of Esther, and it's very pronounced right here with Herod. He's having a big birthday party, pretending like nothing is wrong. And now he does this big boastful thing where, so let it be written, so let it be done. I'm making you this promise. That was a super awesome, sexy dance there, my stepdaughter. You can ask me for anything, up to like half of everything I have, and I'm totally going to give it to you. He's a little liquored up. Everybody's like, yeah, what's she going to ask for? This is the best party ever. This is never going to spiral into a beheading. And then the little girl goes over to her mom, and her mom's like, remember the guy who said my marriage is a fraud? I want him dead. I want his head on a platter. I mean, if we're asking, that's the thing I want. And this is in the defense of this young lady. None of this is her fault. And she's just some poor kid caught up in this whole stupid mess. You can't really defy someone with this kind of power, and her mom's nuts and power hungry as well. So she just does what she's told. It doesn't even occur to her to be like, what I want up to half your kingdom is my liberation from this insane family, and I'll go and do something else. Well, later on, she gets caught up in all of the madness as well, I suppose. But at this point, I sure view her as a sympathetic character. So now she goes back over to the king, and she's like, all right, this is what we want from my super sexy dance that you and all your guests liked. We want you to do the thing that is wildly not politically expedient for you and execute that super popular guy that you have in prison for saying accurate words about you that you don't like and that embarrass you. And so understandably, now actual Bible again here, the king was distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted. He gives into this thing. No, dude, what are you doing? You are so much like Xerxes. You are the clown king who gets dictated to by everyone else around you, even though it's very important that everybody knows that you're a real boy with a real cool outfit and a real shiny hat. And I have people, I tell them they have to do things, and then they have to do it. I'm important. I'm legitimate. My dad was Herod the Great. All of this little boy insecurity, inner monologue probably boils to the surface in this moment. He looks around the room, and all of his drunk guests are like, what are you going to do, homie? And so he assents. He does it. In verse 10, he had John beheaded in the prison. And then, as if that's not grotesque enough, His head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl who carried it to her mother. Again, I feel sympathy toward this girl. I don't get the impression that this was exactly what she was hoping her Tuesday night would be like. But whatever the case, she does it, and Mom's real smug and happy. I can picture her having a few alas poor Yorick words with the severed head of John the Baptist. And I gotta think she's the only one in the room who really feels great about this. Surely everyone else is like, okay, I just got the invite and my wife RSVP'd, and we were maybe going to go to a different party tonight. We thought, well, we said no to the last couple ones with Herod, so we probably better come to this one. I didn't really sign up for anybody getting beheaded or for some guy's head being paraded around on a platter. I actually kind of liked some of the things John the Baptist said. This party's stupid. I want to leave now. Just so everybody knows, I did not have anything to do with that beheading. I was just drinking beers and then he got beheaded. That was not my thing. I'm sorry, this turned weird. And probably everybody just kind of gradually makes excuses to leave the party. And it's like, I left my oven on. I got a thing in the morning meetings or something. I got to go. No, it's not the beheading. That's fine. It's a lovely party. That's fine right there. I have different things or whatever. And they all kind of gradually skulk out. And all that's left is the lingering effects of this decision. Well, what are those lingering effects? Our buddy Josephus once again gives us some pretty good insight. Here is how this decision played out for Herod and his family. So about this time, Aretas, the king of the Arabian city Petra, this is a really cool one that was in the last Indiana Jones, well, the last real Indiana Jones, with the stone-carved city and all of this. It's in Jordan. So this king, Aretas from Petra, and Herod Antipas had a quarrel. Herod the Tetrarch, this is Herod Antipas, had married the daughter of Aretas, called Phasaelis, I think that's right, and had lived with her a great while. But when Herod Antipas was in Rome one time, he lodged with Herod Philip, who was his brother, but not by the same mother, stepbrother siblings under Herod the Great. So here he fell in love with Herodias, this other Herod's wife, who was the daughter of Aristobulus, their brother, and the sister of Agrippa the Great. Ooh, wow, that's complex. So according to Josephus, Phasaelis, the original wife of Herod Antipas, gets word back in Galilee about what's going down in Rome and that a replacement wife is on her way. And so she's kind of sneaky about it. It's like, oh, I want to go to this castle fortress, the fortress coincidentally where John the Baptist was held and executed. And Herod's like, yeah, sure, anything to make you happy. And so she goes that way and then does this really clever plan to be handed off by one general to the next to eventually make her way back to her dad. And her dad is understandably pretty grouchy about the whole thing. It's not just the slight. I mean, at this time, it's also that Herod Antipas is spitting on the union that was forged by this marriage between these people from Petra and the people of Galilee. And so eventually Aretas raises an army. They have a bunch of fights. It doesn't go very well for Herod Antipas. He has to call in Tiberius and the Romans to come and bail him out. Tiberius is super grouchy about that. It's like, okay, fine, we'll put this thing down because you can't handle your own business. But Herod Antipas loses a whole bunch of face as an immediate connecting point to his decision to blow off his wife and marry this other lady who he's actually related to. And then we get the John the Baptist thing, which happens here. Josephus continues, now some of the Jews thought that the destruction of Herod's army came from God as a just punishment of what Herod had done against John, who was called the Baptist. For Herod had killed this good man who had commanded the Jews to exercise virtue, righteousness towards one another, and piety towards God. For only thus, in John's opinion, would the baptism he administered be acceptable to God, namely, if they used it to obtain not pardon for some sins, but rather the cleansing of their bodies, inasmuch as it was taken for granted that their souls had already been purified by justice. Now, many people came in crowds for him, that's for John, for they were greatly moved by his words. Herod, who feared that the great influence John had over the masses might put them into his power and enable him to raise a rebellion, Herod, thought it would be best to put him, John, to death. So in this way, Herod, might prevent any mischief John might cause and not bring himself into difficulties by sparing a man who might make him repent of it when it would be too late. Accordingly, John was sent as a prisoner out of Herod's suspicious temper to Machaerus, the castle I already mentioned, and was put to death. Now the Jews, again, thought that the destruction of this army was sent as a punishment upon Herod and a mark of God's displeasure with him. So as you can see, well after the fact, Josephus, the Jewish historian who doesn't really describe John in any kind of New Testament or Christian terms, Josephus looked at the way this thing all went down, was like, the Herodias thing was the moment at which you lost your kingdom. The Herodias decision was the moment at which the wheels came off for you, Herod Antipas. And Josephus even intones that the masses saw it the same way. So once again, when we look at this passage in Matthew 14, we are not just getting a little anecdote that would have existed in a vacuum in the minds of the audience. We are getting something they would have had all kinds of opinions about in terms of a politician, a celebrity, a wife that probably a lot of them would have viewed as a bloodthirsty, dangerous Jezebel-type outsider. And over the centuries, a whole bunch of smart people have even gone so far as to liken Herod Antipas and Herodias to the extremely compromised and undesirable Ahab and Jezebel of Old Testament fame, with John the Baptist playing the role of the prophet Elijah in the new version of this old story. So this weird, violent, incestuous mess that comes to a head at this drunken, bloody, idiotic party is something that reframes the monarchies that will govern this part of the world. It's something that weakens the Herod dynasty to such a point that the political landscape changes and opens the door for the rebellion that would result in the Romans crushing said rebellion and even destroying the temple in 70 AD. It takes John the Baptist out of the picture, someone who was clearly having some kind of religious effect on the larger consciousness of the Jewish people at the time. And as we're going to see in the next passage we look at, this incident dramatically affects Jesus and the trajectory of what he's doing. So now, in addition to being at odds with the religious leadership, Jesus has lost the loudest voice that is saying Jesus is legit and people should pay attention to him, and it's going to affect where Jesus goes next. Thanks as always for working through the story with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. Let's do this again soon.